House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is not taking impeachment off the table in response to the Mueller report, but she is urging her fellow Democrats to be careful. Either way, President Trump says he's not worried about impeachment as Washington continues to digest the findings in Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report. On Monday, we learned that top Democrats want to hear from former White House counsel Don McGahn about the president's attempts to end the Russia investigation. CBS News White House correspondent Weijia Jiang brings us the latest.
Are you worried about impeachment, Mr. President?
A little bit.
During the annual Easter egg roll at the White House, President Trump brushed off the possibility of facing impeachment. And on Capitol Hill, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi tamped down the talk, too. Ahead of a conference call with House Democrats late this afternoon, Pelosi sent them a letter writing, "The facts regarding holding the president accountable can be gained outside of impeachment hearings." While Democrats agree the Mueller report provides evidence of obstruction of justice,
I would say in every way this is more significant than Watergate.
They're grappling with how to use it, with big names like Elizabeth Warren and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez pushing impeachment, while others urge caution.
I think we have to be very careful here. The American people, a lot of them still don't believe that President Trump is doing things to destroy our democracy.
On Face the Nation, Congressman Elijah Cummings, chairman of the House Oversight Committee, also talked about the subpoena he issued seeking years of the president's financial records. Today, Mr. Trump counterpunched with a lawsuit to block it. His lawyer said in a statement the request lacks any legitimate legislative purpose and is an abuse of power. Cummings said this complaint reads more like political talking points than a reasoned legal brief.
For more on this, let's bring in Weijia Jiang, who is at the White House, and CBS News Capitol Hill producer Rebecca Kaplan joins us as well. Welcome to you both. Rebecca, let's begin with you because Democrats had a conference call Monday evening to discuss their strategy on the Mueller report moving forward. What can you tell us about what was discussed?
Well, Errol, this is the first time that Democrats have really gotten to talk about that full Mueller report since it came out last week. They've been scattered around the country on this two-week recess. And tonight, very quickly, not that surprisingly, turned into a larger discussion about impeachment. There are some members who now, having seen most of the report, at least what was not redacted, said that they think that there is enough evidence there to actually start moving on impeachment proceedings. That, in particular, was a view we heard from Val Demings, a representative from Florida who sits on the very critical Judiciary and Intelligence Committees. And the Judiciary Committee is the one that would oversee impeachment proceedings. But really the message from Speaker Pelosi and all of her top lieutenants on these committees is that they're not ready to do this yet. There are investigations underway in many of these House committees. They are doing their work right now. And Pelosi really outlined this in a letter to members actually before the call, saying there are facts to follow and we don't need impeachment proceedings to get these facts. So their message is sit tight, move with caution, and let's collect everything we can first.
And Weijia, as Democrats have this debate, we know that there aren't enough Republicans to support their effort to make it successful. So do you get a sense there at the White House that folks there want Democrats to keep having this impeachment debate? Because in some ways, is there a calculation that it helps President Trump?
Well, it certainly helps that the Democrats can't even decide, and there's clearly friction even among their own party about how to handle the evidence from the Mueller report. And so President Trump is maintaining a very cool stance about impeachment, the big I word. In fact, he talked about it publicly for the first time since the Mueller report dropped. You know, we've heard him on Twitter. Of course, he's been firing off tweets all weekend long from Florida, and we saw him briefly sort of celebrate the conclusion. But for the first time, he answered questions from reporters today here at the White House. And very frankly, he was asked, are you worried about impeachment? And he said, no, not even a little bit. And so certainly, you know, if he were worried, he can point to the fact that Democrats who, you know, would be the ones leading the charge can't even decide. And I think his advisors are reassuring him that it would be a potential political risk and time-consuming, time that they do not have as both parties try to focus on 2020.
Right. And as we've mentioned, the House Judiciary Committee has subpoenaed former White House counsel Don McGahn because of what he reportedly did and did not do as far as carrying out President Trump's demands. Rebecca, what do lawmakers there on Capitol Hill want to hear from Don McGahn?
Well, certainly there is value for them in having McGahn get in front of cameras, which is what would happen at a hearing like this, and tell this story out loud, perhaps provide further detail that did not make it all the way into the final version of the report. But there was clearly a lot of instances where he was the primary source for what Mueller talked about in this whole volume of the report that dealt with obstruction. In particular, multiple instances where the president called up McGahn at home and indicated that he wanted special counsel Mueller to be fired. That was one of the more notable and, for some people, damning aspects of this report. So certainly there's not necessarily much more in terms of tools that the House Judiciary Committee has to unearth things that the special counsel did not unearth, but I think there is value in having him say it publicly. So the subpoena they issued this evening asked for a range of documents from McGahn by May 7th, and they want him to come testify in front of the committee on May 21st.
So at the very least, Democrats are ratcheting up the pressure so they can have the testimony there on Capitol Hill. And Weijia, as you alluded to, President Trump is still calling the investigation in general the worst and most corrupt political witch hunt in history. But then at the same time, the White House cites the same report in saying, look, we told you there was no collusion, there was no obstruction. How are White House aides and officials responding to your questions as far as them seeming to try and have it both ways?
They're really pointing to the origins of the investigation, and they believe that it never should have happened, that it was a waste of money, and that, from the very beginning, they didn't have any reason to launch this investigation except political retaliation for Trump winning the White House. And so, I think that they're saying it never should have happened, but hey, since it did, look at the conclusions. We told you so. As we've been saying all along, there is no collusion, and there was not enough to say there was actually obstruction of justice. But, what is fascinating here is that, even though the president has said himself that he has won, the game is over, we know that that's not true. And he is increasingly more frustrated because the narrative is not going that way for him. So even though he's putting on this show that he is calm and happy, behind the scenes, he is frustrated. And his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, even said that he's angry at Mueller for this report, for the findings in it. And certainly, if McGahn were to testify, he's going to be angry over what McGahn might say. In fact, he already is trying to discredit McGahn by saying, do not trust people who take notes, because we know McGahn took copious notes about that request to fire Mueller. And so it seems that the president does want it both ways, but in the end, he has to concede that the investigation happened if he wants to celebrate those findings.
Now, what's interesting is top Democrats have declined to see the less redacted copy of the Mueller report. Rebecca, what's your sense on why that is, and politically why Democrats feel it will work out for them in the long term?
Well, the Democrats' baseline has been that they want the complete report at least available to Congress with everything unredacted. So the version that Attorney General Barr said he was going to make available for members of Congress in DOJ had some of those redactions lifted, including things that dealt with ongoing legal matters, things that could have potentially embarrassed third-party people who helped with the investigation but were not implicated in anything, and also information that was the big question for Democrats is that they want to see information that was in grand jury proceedings. This is called 6E material, and they've insisted all along that they be able to view that. And what Attorney General Barr said was that he was not going to make that available in this less redacted version of the report. And so Democrats said, we don't want to see it at all. There are other, well, they do want to see the whole report. They just don't want to see this particular version that the Attorney General is offering. Their other complaint they had was that he was only allowing a very small number of members of Congress and staff to view the report. And they said this is something that should be available to all members of Congress, or at least a wider range of people than have access to it right now. So far, the only person that we have seen go in to view this less redacted version is Doug Collins, the top Republican on the Judiciary Committee. And he said it didn't change anything for him. It reinforced what he learned, that there was no collusion, no obstruction, and he's ready to move on.
Now, finally, Attorney General William Barr is scheduled to appear on Capitol Hill at sometime in the beginning of May. Robert Mueller has been requested to testify by May 23rd. Weijia, as we wrap this up, I'm wondering, what is the White House watching for or preparing for as these two names prepare to testify?
Well, Attorney General Barr already said quite a bit to give a preview of what he could say when he testifies on Capitol Hill. We had that press conference, and he drew conclusions that he did not have to draw. But he's really going to have to answer a lot of questions about something he already said, which is that he believed there was spying on the Trump campaign, which, of course, was extremely controversial for him to say that, because it's almost a line out of the Trump playbook, something that he always says at rallies and throughout his presidency, that the Democrats spied on him to try to get answers and to try to influence the election. And so I'm guessing, going to be answering a lot of questions about that, even though since saying that, he has tried to walk it back. And as far as Mueller goes, he's going to have to answer the big question that might never be answered, which is why he did not draw a conclusion on obstruction of justice when he did perfectly fine on the question of collusion. So he's going to have to say how he can have it both ways. He has said before that because the Justice Department, this particular Justice Department, does not believe you can indict a sitting president, he was going to leave that to Congress. But then he went ahead and drew a conclusion about one part of this and not the other. And so I think the White House will be watching very closely to try to discredit anything that he says about all of that evidence that he laid out, even though he did not draw a conclusion.
Yeah, the political drama around all of this continues. Weijia Jiang and Rebecca Kaplan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Errol.